We will go ahead and call our budget hearing for USD 431 on September 11th to order. Roll call, all present. Item 3, approval of the 2023-24 needs assessment. Mr. Kratos, you can explain that.
The needs assessment is basically just a discussion item for us to discuss, how, kind of how we've come to the point where we're using some of the funds. A lot of the information that's on there is very redundant to last year. A couple of the goals that I did go ahead and put on there is to making sure that we are working towards trying to get our budgetary numbers to the point where we can continue to pay for raises and increases to different things, being financially and physically sound. One area that we have discussed in here as a board and that I've discussed in the needs assessment as well is the need for fully funding of special education. Then that is about a $300,000 chunk out of our general fund that is above and beyond what we get from the state for our special education students. So if the state would to go ahead and fully fund special education, that would free up money in our general fund to be able to spend towards academic services. So just a few areas. It's broken down by grade level, middle school, by building. Actually, it's broken down by building, and pretty much repetitive from each building to another. So, increased funding, time and staff development, increased paraprofessional support in special education classrooms, maintain low teacher-pupil ratio, and greater individualized instruction. So those are the main focus areas in several of these. So questions about the building needs assessment?
Any questions on any of the building needs assessment? There's quite a bit in there. If you take time to go through it and digest it. Takes quite a bit of work from the administrators to put that together. So.
Is there any hope for full funding?
When we went to the USA conference, there was talk that the governor was going to do something to help in that area. It's been pretty quiet since then, but it's a main focus of basically every legislative group that I've heard from that's on an education side. So I think it'll still continue to be a focus and a push. We'll see if we can get the votes to move forward with that.
And I think last year the governor proposed that in her budget, and then the legislature pulled that back. So
and
they gave a little bit of money, but not
Yeah.
the 73 million they were.
Yeah, so
requesting.
that was a huge hurdle to actually have the governor put that into her budget. Typically, it's not been in the governor's budget, and so it's kind of been an uphill climb. One of the other benefits is that there's $3 billion in excess funds for the state. And probably by the time we get to the legislative session, there'll be something like $3.5 billion in excess funds. So, there is hope that's going to happen. So we'll see what happens. So.
No, they got our hopes up
Yeah.
and have not done anything with it.
Yeah. And they got our hopes up even during our legislative session this last time, that it was in a bill that was making its way through, and then all of a sudden that bill just died. And then and one bill, I think the House bill, it was in it, Senate bill was not, and then when they went to the conference session, it just all of a sudden kind of disappeared, and that's where the 7.5 million
came, yeah.
So they funded about 10%, not 10% more, but 10% of what was asked for. So,
Any other questions? Not, I move to approve the USD 431 2023-2024 budget needs assessment as presented.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. The next item is the approval of the 2023-24 district budget.
I provided the code 99 for each of you. If you take a look at the second to right column, that would be column 6. That's the amount of taxes levied. We've talked about that. So if you look at column 5, that is the budgeted expenditures. I say it every year. I'm going to say it again. I am not planning on spending, where is it at? 1.5 million in capital outlay. The way it works is that I have to put down that we're going to spend it, giving me budget authority to spend it in the event of an emergency. You know, we have items in capital outlay that are planned, because that's where our payment for the turf and track is going to come out of. You know, I have some capital outlay expenditures that I'm expecting to have happen due to some planning and some long-term range looking at things, but that only accomplishes about 500,000. If something catastrophic happens and we only put down 500,000, that's all I can spend, even though there's 1.5 million sitting there. So every year that fund, it shows that we're gonna spend it all, but I never ever intend to do so unless something catastrophic happens. General fund, supplemental general fund, those are typically zero-based budget items. So the general fund, if I do not spend it down to a 0, then the state asks for their money back. And so we always want to spend it down to 0. Even if spending it down is in that June or late June board meeting where we transfer some money. So that way we take full advantage of the general fund that we have. Supplemental general fund, that fund is typically used for salaries, and as of right now, that fund is about 95% budgeted for salaries and benefits. So that's where that money will be going to. The federal funds looks a little big in 1.3, almost 1.4 million. Remember, that is title funds. That is also our ESSER funds. So our 1.2 for the last of the ESSER money, that's in the federal funds as well. So that's why that one looks really big as compared to previous years. So that will be spent down over the next year, because we have another year to spend down the last of the ESSER money. At risk, the K-12 at risk, which is code 13, that fund has grown. By statute, I have to transfer money from the general fund and the supplemental general fund into the at-risk fund. But I've also but I've also budgeted to utilize more of the at-risk funds for salaries. And the reason that I can justify doing that is because of the work of the administrators designating and identifying the students that we have that are identified through a state a set of criteria from the state of students that are at risk. Then I can say we have 20% of our students in teacher A's classroom. I can designate 20% of their salary to be out of at-risk funds. So the administrative staff gave me a list of those last summer. Then we have adjusted. We had some percentages already, and we've adjusted those percentages so that starting on the September 20th payroll, those percentages will be adjusted. So does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So, and we kind of talked about that a little bit through negotiations. That's where we decided to come up with the last 1%. So that's where that is. So we won't spend all 1.75 million of that, but we'll spend about 1.3 or 1.2 on salaries for next year on the at-risk.
And that is one fund that you can carry over funds from one
Correct.
year to the next. You don't have to zero that fund out every year.
Yes, that is correct. That is correct. So at-risk, we can carry over capital outlay, we can carry over pretty much everything below supplemental general, we can carry over. The title funds, they don't like us to carry over very much. They give us some specifics because that's federal money, so they're really good about being very specific on some of those things. So the bond and interest service debt, that down there at number 62, that has pretty much leveled out, and that was the whole idea, and that was one of the reasons that we felt like we could go ahead and flat or bring that mill levy down just a little bit to go ahead and accomplish that revenue neutral in those three areas that we had talked about. But previous administration had done a really good job of making sure that that was a healthy fund, so that in the future we don't have to worry about making that payment for our bond and interest. So that gives us some good liquidity, as well as number 47. Number 47. No, that's not right. Sorry. Number 53, it doesn't give a number of expenditures, but we have over 300,000. I don't know the exact number. I have to go to the cash balance report in our contingency reserve fund as well. So within this budget, or within the Code 99, it doesn't give the expenditures for contingency reserve because those all have to be approved by you. So I cannot go into contingency reserve and spend any money or transfer any money unless you as the board approve that. So that was one suggestion. We had some issues with our LOB because we didn't get as much in the LOB from the county as we had anticipated. So we went ahead and spent that all the way down as far as we could, which adjusted the LOB mill levy a little bit. But it took us from being $73,000 short to about $4,300 short, $4,300 short. It adjusted the mill levies, but it also, the LOB will have to give back about $2,300 just because of that. But if we had left it with a reserve of $73,000, we'd had to give back $43,000. So that one we kind of had to play with. Craig at the state suggested that we take money out of contingency and flatten that out so we could spend down the LOB all the way out. And we decided he and I decided against that because I would have to make that transfer without a direct authority by you within the contingency fund. So long story short, we thought about it, he said, yeah, I don't think this is the best idea. And I said, if you don't think it's a good idea, I don't think it's a good idea. So we decided against it, and we went away from that. So
One other comment on the contingency fund. 10 years ago, when the state was tight on money, the legislature really didn't want us carrying more than a 5% contingency fund.
right,
Well, now the state is carrying
yeah,
way more in surplus or contingency, so they've kind of changed thinking to where it's now 10 to 12%. They say
Right.
is where we ought to keep a contingency fund. So
right.
they're realizing that we have to have some reserves to operate on.
One of the changes to the budget this year was a spreadsheet out to the side that actually gives us our reserves. So for capital outlay, contingency fund, and there was one more, maybe bond and interest. So we're right at 12% on all of those. So we're right within the state average on all of those. And just so you don't think that our contingency fund is right at $620,000. So just, I mean, and that's actually money that we have in that fund right now, as compared to the expenses that we could have. So that 344,000, that actually is showing what expenses we had out of there last year, which includes all of the payments that we've made to ATG out of contingency fund, as well as our payment to P1 for the chiller. So that's those expenses.
Any other questions on any of the budget? If not, I move to approve the USD 431, 2023, 24 budget as presented. Motion been made and seconded. Any other discussion? Not, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you all.
I think we're done with this meeting.
To adjourn. Second.
Motion been made to adjourn and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0.